The village of São Bartolomeu do Vale was the kind that seemed frozen in time, guarded beneath an eternal mist that hung over the hills. Narrow cobblestone streets, old houses with peeling walls, silent churches where the bells had stopped ringing years ago. The town survived discreetly, ignored by modern maps, an island of antiquity in a changing world. During the day, the place was peaceful, almost welcoming, with its few residents moving slowly but never smiling. But as night fell, a tangible and frightening change occurred. The streets became an echo of themselves. The locals closed doors and windows earlier than usual, the sounds of bolts echoing in the stillness. It was as if something invisible prowled the streets, something that belonged to the night and was best not seen. Few outsiders noticed this sudden change in atmosphere, but all who stayed long enough heard the same warning delivered with silent terror in the eyes of the residents. Beware of the night of the lanterns. Clara, a journalism student in her final year of college, was one of those outsiders. Young, curious, and stubborn, she didn't believe in superstitions. Folklore was for history books, not for newspaper articles. When she heard that an entire town avoided leaving their homes on a certain night of the year because of supposed mysterious lights in the fields, she saw the perfect opportunity to write an article that mixed the logic of science with the beauty of folklore. She imagined herself winning an award, debunking a silly legend, and bringing light to a forgotten place. She arrived in São Bartolomeu on a gray autumn morning. The air smelled of wet earth and wood smoke, a smell that seemed to belong to another century. She stayed at the only inn in town, run by a portly man named Mr. Raoul. His body seemed heavy with years of sadness. He greeted her with a handshake that felt more like a warning than a welcome. "You've come on a bad date," he murmured, carefully choosing his words. "Tonight is the night no one likes to go out." Clara smiled ironically. Her excitement was at its peak. "The famous Night of the Lanterns? I thought it was just a story to scare children." But Raoul's face remained serious, his eyes heavy with weariness. "It's not a story. And it's not for children either. It's a warning. What you're looking for in the fields, they don't want to be found." In the central square, Clara tried to talk to the residents, but she met a wall of silence and fear. Everyone avoided her, looking away when she tried to ask them questions. An elderly woman, with hands gnarled by age, even grabbed her arm and whispered with a desperation that seemed in no way staged, "Leave before sunset, child. Curiosity is the door that opens for them." But Clara was not intimidated. The more she was refused, the more determined she became. She spent the afternoon preparing her camera, flashlight, and voice recorder. She knew she needed evidence. She was ready to prove that it was all just a legend. As the sun began to set behind the hills, the town retreated into its shell of fear. Doors were locked, windows were bolted, the sounds of the latches echoing through the empty streets like the sound of a tomb being sealed. The darkness descended with a disconcerting speed, swallowing the last rays of light. Clara walked alone, her backpack on her back, heading toward the field. With every step, she felt that eyes hidden behind the curtains were following her. They were not looks of contempt, but of profound pity, as if they already saw her as someone condemned. The feeling sent a shiver down her spine. At 11 o'clock at night, Clara was already among the tall grass, far from the last houses. The sky was a deep black, without stars, without moon. The darkness was complete, oppressive, and the only thing that broke the silence was the constant sound of crickets, filling the air with a repetitive song. She turned on her flashlight, the light flickering and cutting through the darkness like a knife. The air grew colder and colder, a cold that did not seem to come from the temperature, but from a deeper place, a void. It was then that she saw the first light, faint, trembling, like a solitary flame floating in the middle of the field. Her journalistic mind raced for logical explanations, swamp gases, a lost lantern. A few seconds later, another one appeared, a considerable distance away, and then another, and another. Soon dozens of old lanterns seemed to hover over nothing, scattered like a silent procession. The flames did not flicker like normal fire. They had a ghostly glow, a bluish light that seemed colder than the darkness that surrounded it. Clara held her breath, fascinated. She had her story. The phenomenon was real, even if it wasn't supernatural. She turned on her camera and started filming, with the hand lantern held firmly at her wrist. "This is it," she murmured into her voice recorder. "Some kind of natural phenomenon. Gases, perhaps. Will-o'-the-wisp. Nothing supernatural." But as she adjusted the camera's focus, she noticed the detail that made her heart race. Behind each lantern, there was a silhouette. They were not ordinary people. The shapes looked human, but they did not touch the ground. The contours were diffused, almost transparent, like figures made of shadow, of a substance that seemed to be the absence of light. They moved in a slow dance, a ballet of spectral forms that deeply frightened her. Clara tried to convince herself that it was some kind of visual trick, a reflection of light, but her mind no longer accepted the excuses. Then one of the lanterns moved closer to her, very close. The flame trembled as if it were breathing, and inside it, Clara swore she saw a face, a pale, distorted face, with eyes glazed with pain, as if trapped behind glass. She took a step back, her heart pounding against her ribs, and then she heard the first whisper, "Come with us." The sound did not come from a visible mouth. It was as if the very air around the lantern was speaking, and the voice was that of a woman who sounded as if she were drowning. Clara swallowed hard, swinging her hand lantern around. There was no one but the shadowy figures. "Who's there?" she shouted, more out of instinct than courage. The voices multiplied, 100 of them, overlapping voices, speaking all at once. "Come, come with us, come." The lanterns began to move in sync, opening up space between them, forming a corridor of light that pointed toward the center of the field. Clara's instinct screamed at her to run back to town, but something stronger, a mixture of fascination and despair, pushed her forward. An invisible force attracted her, a silent promise of answers she couldn't resist. She entered. The corridor of lanterns closed behind her, as if it had never existed. She was trapped in the procession of lanterns. Now, surrounded by the supernatural light, Clara felt the cold intensify with every step. Her breath came out in white clouds. Her fingers began to lose feeling. The figures holding the lanterns advanced with her, but always keeping the same distance, like a silent army escorting her to the slaughter. The voices continued to whisper, but the words were intelligible, a chorus of agony that made her want to scream. Then one of the shadows stood out, the shape of a man, tall, faceless, with his lantern raised. The light of the lantern revealed his hand, which he held an object. The object was a camera, the same camera she was holding. He pointed forward, to where the field should have been, but it was no longer there. "What do you want from me?" Clara asked, her voice trembling, terror finally overcoming her. The answer came in unison, dozens of overlapping voices, whispering at the same time. "We want company." The ground beneath her feet began to change. The grass disappeared, replaced by a black, liquid surface, a void that stretched as far as the eye could see. The lanterns floated over the void, and their reflections danced on the surface, as if the water had captured their souls. The smell of rot and wet earth became stronger, suffocating. Clara stopped in a panic. "No, this isn't real." But when she tried to retreat, she realized there was no way back. The lanterns completely surrounded her, floating over the abyss. They were the only real things in the space, and it was there that the transformation began. The figures that were once just shadows began to gain clearer contours. Pale faces, hollow eyes, expressions of suffering. They all stared at her. They all reached out their hands to her. The voices became clearer. She heard a cry, a scream, the sound of a broken heart. They were the voices of the people who had been taken. Clara felt the ground give way, and the liquid rose to her knee. The air became colder, and she felt the pain of the cold in her bones. Her skin seemed to be falling apart, and she could feel the bones in her face. She fell to her knees, clinging to nothing. The camera slipped from her hands and fell into the void. The last recording showed Clara's face, distorted by fear, surrounded by lights that closed in on her like a flaming cocoon. Her voice joined the chorus. "Now you are one of us." The next morning, Mr. Raoul, the innkeeper, found her backpack on the edge of the field, in a small puddle of water. Inside, the camera was still recording. Watching it, he saw the first minutes of the walk, the appearance of the lanterns, the whispers, and then only darkness. But the audio didn't stop. For long minutes, hundreds of voices continued to repeat the same phrase, "Now you are one of us." Mr. Raoul's heart broke, and he cried. He had the proof, the testimony of what happened, but who would believe him? He buried it in the backyard garden. Clara never returned, and in São Bartolomeu de Vale, from that night on, no one ever dared to go out when the lanterns appeared. They knew that a new reflection, a new victim, had joined the group. But they say that if you look closely, among the figures carrying the lights, you can recognize the face of a young woman with a camera in her hands, still trying to film the proof of the legend.